Welcome back, guys. So in this video I'm just quickly going to try and run over what gimbal locking is and how we can sort of help our animators by avoiding it as much as possible. So we use this character for setting up this and is animating sorry, I'm just going to let it play through. And one more time. So it's animated by Christopher Andersen, and during this animation process we always experience that there are some different rotation orders that we can use, and that's what gimbal locking basically is. So when we rotate something, if I go hold down E and I set it to gimbal, you can see there is an option that's called gimbal, but right now it's set to world. So I'm just going to try and show you how it is in object mode, which is where most people animate. So if I rotate this, you can see I get a value here. But now that's rotated, I've changed these rotations, right? It looks like the rotation is moving correctly around, but really what it is, it's a hierarchy. So you would think that if I move this rotation here, that will give me a rotation in the set value, right? But you can see here, as soon as I rotate that, I'm getting all sorts of rotation values. So what is that? Let's try and put this one back here, and then I'm going to hold down E and I'm going to set that to gimbal. And you'll see that when I rotate this, it's actually rotating the x-axis with it. And this is actually what's really happening under the hood. And also you'll see that when I rotate this one, then you can see that I'm actually rotating the other axis as well, which is problematic, right? Because it's prioritizing the z axis over the y axis in this case. This is sort of like a priority case because we always have to have a hierarchy. Like one of these axes has to come first and one has to be last and one obviously has to be in the middle. So we have to choose. So how do we change these sort of things? We can go in and we can say control, or we can say control A, and then we can go in here and under the transform node, which is this object we got here, we can see here we got something called the rotation order. And we can see we got X, Y, and Z, or C. And that means that C is the lowest part. Oh, sorry, the highest part in this hierarchy. It means that both of the other ones will rotate with that. You can see when I rotate in the z-axis, the x-axis and the y-axis are rotating with it. So if we go backwards, if we rotate the y-axis, we'll see that the x-axis is rotating with us, but the z-axis is standing still. And then lastly, if I rotate the x-axis, there's no rotation in the other parts. So for this thing, well, let's say we gotta animate a walk cycle. So I translate it upwards and sideways and forwards and backwards. What is the most important thing? Because we can never change that there is an order to these things. But what we can do is we can try and figure out like which axis or which axis do we need the most for these sort of setups, right? So by taking this thing here and moving it, we can say like, okay, if we're moving the character back, like as in a walk cycle, he's walking around, which is probably what he's going to use his legs most for, right? Is that we probably need him to be able to sort of do something like this, right? And something like this, right? Without actually changing the rotation axis. That kind of makes this axis, the x-axis, our main axis in this case. But also what we really need to make sure is that we can sort of like rotate our foot like this and still move his foot like this, right? So he can move his feet out and around. And so the two axes, we're probably not going to move this one as much as possible, which is why I've chosen to have that in the end. Again, people will have different opinions, but all you need to know is that you can find the rotation order here, and this is sort of like what we call gimbal locking. And gimbal locking basically means that I'm locking out my rotation channels here, because now I no longer can tell the difference between the Z channel and the X channel, because you can see like right now they're just lying on top of each other, which means that if I rotate the Z axis like so, and I rotate the X axis, sorry, I'm having some issues there. So you can see they're actually rotating in the same rotation order and not what it looks like in the local or in the object axis. So keep that in mind. Some people would argue that you can also try, if you really are keen on being able to use all your axes, you can create an underlying controller. So in this case, we would have a controller here that would be parented underneath this one, like so, and then you would have your IK handle underneath this one. So that's sort of like the last solution. Some people will have offset controllers exactly for this reason, so they can always animate their feet in the right axis, In most cases, you can get away with just changing the rotation order to the priority. So if somebody's talking about gimbal locking, then this is sort of like where you can change that. And really what it is just the order of which the rotation is happening. And keep in mind, you can change these all around. I'd say I use about 2 or 3 of them. I think I can't remember the most common ones. I have them written down somewhere. But it'll also be different for, you can see like here, if I select a controller here, let's try and take an FK controller somewhere. So if my x-axis is down this way, you can see if I'm going into object mode, holding down W and left clicking and I go to object mode, you can see that my X channel or X-axis, which is the red one, is the direction. That's the aim axis, right? Because the next joint in this chain would be out here somewhere at the end of the hand. And that means that it creates an orientation. That means that Z is up and down, Y is back and forth, and the X channel is the twist channel. That's important to keep in mind because it means that the rotation order can't be the same for every single rig, since all rigs are not built the same. It's not always that X is the down axis. So first of all, you need to go into your rig, select your controller, and then hold down W and hold down your left mouse click and go to object mode, so you can see which way the object is really pointing. Because if we just take whatever object it is, you can see here, and I'm in world mode, the only direction I'm going to see is always the standard world direction, which is just any created object's direction in Maya, right? So with that said, just know that you can change the rotation order. So if somebody's saying I am gimbal locking like a lot in this axis, then try and see if you can free it up here. Just know that if you already animated, you want to do this in the beginning of the animation. If you have already animated, then it's I'd say like you're either going to lose some animation because obviously you're changing the rotation order of your things. And that means that the axis is no longer keying on the right position, right? So if I take this, I think that makes sense to you guys. But if I go like this, right, I rotated the hand like there. So you can see something like this, right? And now I changed the rotation axis. So right now it's X, Y, Z. Let's try and go like this. Let's try and see where Z is. I'm trying to find an example here where this will go wrong. I think it's only because I'm using only one axis right now, but if I was to use more than one axis, it would probably start to show that it would snap around and be quite confused about. So you can see that I'm getting snapping now when I'm changing these rotation orders, and that's what you should keep in mind. So hopefully that was that's telling you a little bit how to sort of approach it. If somebody says they don't understand why they're getting multiple values, like here, when they're rotating in one axis, that's because they're gimbal locking, right? It's because their axes are getting closer to each other. So keep that in mind. Find out the 2 main priority axes, and then figure out if you need an extra underlying controller, if they can actually get away in the animation graph with just having, like small values that are like extra like this, because it's not always completely avoidable. It's something that most animators learn to work their way around. But in order to help them and help each other and make a better production, we should keep that in mind. So yeah, with that, have a good day, and I'll speak to you soon.